Birthdays are supposed to be special. They're architectural markers in the timeline of a life, ornamental keystones you can look back on and say, that was a good year. On the morning of my 35th, the structure of my life felt sound, the design flawless. I believed I was living inside a masterpiece. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee, a dark, rich aroma that was the first brushstroke of every day I shared with Sophia. It was followed by a sound I loved more than any symphony, her faint, happy humming from the kitchen. It was her tell, a low, tuneless vibration of pure contentment that meant she was in her element, likely covered in a light dusting of flour. I swung my legs out of bed, the cool hardwood floor a familiar shock against my feet. Our bedroom was a sanctuary of soft grays and morning light, a space we had designed together to be a refuge from the noise of the world. Everything in it, from the heavy linen curtains to the stack of her books on the nightstand, felt like a testament to a shared existence. When I walked into the kitchen, she turned, a wooden spoon in her hand. "Happy birthday, handsome," she said, her smile reaching her eyes. She leaned over the granite island to kiss me, a quick, familiar press of her lips that tasted faintly of sugar. She was making my favorite, buttermilk pancakes with fresh strawberries and a mountain of whipped cream. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore one of my old button-down shirts as an apron, its sleeves rolled up to her elbows. A smudge of flour on her cheek made her look impossibly, effortlessly beautiful. She was the architect of my happiness, and this moment was her latest, perfect creation. "Looks like I'm in for a good day," I said, wrapping my arms around her waist from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. The fabric of the shirt was soft, smelling of her, of us. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "You deserve it." She had been planning a surprise party for weeks. Or, at least, a surprise she wanted me to know about. Sophia was terrible at keeping secrets. I'd catch her whispering on the phone to our friends, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss the moment I entered a room. I'd see hastily scribbled notes tucked into her purse. I played along, of course, feigning ignorance. The performance was part of the gift. The joy wasn't in the surprise itself, but in the knowledge that she was pouring so much effort into the architecture of my happiness, building a day just for me. Our marriage, like any structure built to last, hadn't always been easy. It had weathered storms. We met in a crowded, chaotic lecture hall in college, two ambitious kids with blueprints for the future sketched out in our notebooks. We fell in love with the unthinking velocity of youth, a hard, fast collision that felt like destiny. We built a life I was proud of, brick by painstaking brick. I started my own architectural firm from our tiny spare bedroom, and she was my foundation, my unwavering support system. There were financial strains, arguments over paint colors, the quiet grief of a miscarriage in our third year of marriage. But I thought we had something unbreakable. I thought our foundation was solid rock. After breakfast, a feast of sugar and affection, I left for the office with a spring in my step. Sophia kissed me at the door, her lips lingering on mine just a moment too long, a silent promise. "I'll see you tonight," she said, her brown eyes sparkling with a secret she was bursting to share. "I can't wait," I replied, my mind already imagining the celebration, the faces of our friends, the warmth of her hand in mine. I felt like the luckiest man alive. The day was a symphony of benevolent predictability. My colleagues at the firm, a talented and loyal team I'd handpicked over the years, surprised me with a ridiculously large chocolate cake at lunch. Emails and texts from friends and family flooded my phone, each a small, welcome brick in the edifice of a perfect day. Marcus, my best friend since we were clumsy teenagers navigating the treacherous hallways of high school, was the capstone. He called me mid-afternoon, his voice booming through the phone. 35, Nate. You're officially an old man. How do the joints feel?" "They feel like they're about to kick your ass on the golf course this weekend," I retorted. "We'll see about that," he laughed. "Listen, I know Sophia's got her whole secret agent thing planned for tonight, but you and I are grabbing a drink first. Non-negotiable. The Oak Barrel. 6 o'clock. "You got it," I said. Marcus was my anchor, the one person outside of Sophia who knew the original blueprints of my life. He'd seen my struggles, celebrated my successes, and offered blunt, unsolicited advice through it all. The workday wrapped up in a blur of client calls and blueprint reviews. I was designing a new public library, a project that felt important, permanent. I loved the clean lines, the logic of structure, the creation of something beautiful and functional from nothing. It was what I did. I built things that were meant to last. As I was packing my briefcase, a wave of contentment washed over me. A thriving business, a beautiful home, a loving wife, a loyal best friend. The design was complete. It was perfect. Then, a minor, inconsequential snag. I reached for my back pocket. Empty. My wallet. I pictured it sitting on the dresser in our bedroom, right where I left it after taking out cash for the week. It wasn't a big deal, but I'd need it for the bar for the rest of the evening. I shot a quick text to Marcus. Damn. Forgot my wallet at home. Going to swing by and grab it. Meet you at the Oak Barrel in 30:45 tops. His reply was instantaneous. No problem. Don't let the missus spoil the surprise too much by showing up early. I laughed, shaking my head as I walked to my car. She's already outdone herself, I typed back. The drive home was an exercise in muscle memory. The familiar turns of the suburban streets, the canopy of oak trees lining our road, the satisfying crunch of my tires on our gravel driveway. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. Why would I? It was my birthday. I was on top of the world, driving home to the heart of my perfect life. That's when I saw the car. It was parked in front of our house, a sleek, black sedan I didn't recognize. An expensive model, the kind with tinted windows and an aggressive, predatory grille. I frowned. My first thought was the party. Sophia had mentioned deliveries, caterers, maybe a decorator. It made sense. Still, a faint, unidentifiable disquiet pricked at the back of my mind. I parked in the driveway, grabbed my keys, and walked up the front steps. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Even with preparations underway, there should have been some sound, music, the clatter of dishes, Sophia's humming. Sophia. I called out as I stepped inside, the key still jingling in my hand. You here? No answer. Only the hushed, waiting silence of an empty stage. I set my briefcase down by the door. The air smelled strange. There was a faint aroma of something baking, something sweet, but it was overlaid with a cloying, unfamiliar cologne. It felt wrong, like a discordant note in a familiar song. I made my way toward the kitchen, where I assumed she'd be. The silence unnerved me, each footstep on the hardwood floor seeming to echo in the stillness. It was the silence of a held breath. That's when I heard it. Laughter. A man's voice, deep and smooth, followed by Sophia's unmistakable giggle. It wasn't the hearty laugh she saved for my bad jokes, or the polite chuckle she used with clients. This was different. It was softer, more intimate. A secret sound. I froze in the hallway, my heart beginning to pound a heavy, frantic rhythm against my ribs. My first instinct was to call out again, to announce my presence and shatter the intimacy of that sound. But some other, darker instinct took over. The architect in me, the part that needs to understand the true structure of things, needed to see. I moved silently, my feet light on the floorboards, my breath caught in my chest. I crept toward the kitchen doorway, my world narrowing to that single rectangle of light. When I reached the opening, I saw them, and the flawless architecture of my life collapsed into ruin. Sophia was there, her back to me, leaning against the kitchen island. And with her was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. They were standing close. Too close. His hand was resting on the small of her back, his fingers splayed possessively against the fabric of her blouse. And before my mind could process the scene, before I could draw a single breath, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It wasn't an innocent gesture. It was a slow, deep, lingering kiss. The kind a man gives a woman he knows intimately. I watched, paralyzed, as her head tilted back, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. The air was sucked from the room. The world went silent, the blood roaring in my ears. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. My hands, the hands that designed buildings and held my wife, balled into tight, white-knuckled fists at my sides. A low, guttural sound escaped my throat, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. What the hell is going on here? My voice was a low, sharp crack of thunder in the quiet room. They jumped apart as if they'd been electrocuted. The intimate bubble they had occupied popped, leaving a vacuum of raw, ugly reality. Sophia's face, when she spun around, was a mask of pure, ashen horror. Her eyes were wide, her mouth a perfect O of shock. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind the pale, waxy complexion of a mannequin. She looked from me to him and back again, her movements frantic, bird-like. The man, on the other hand, was a study in cool composure. He took a small step back, smoothing the front of his ridiculously expensive suit. He turned to face me, and his expression wasn't one of guilt or fear. It was amusement. A detached, almost clinical curiosity, as if he were observing a mildly interesting chemical reaction. David, I would later learn, was his name. The name of the man who detonated my world. It's nothing, he said, his voice as smooth and oily as his cologne. He had the audacity to shrug, a minute, dismissive gesture. It's just a kiss. Just a kiss, asterisk. The phrase hung in the air between us, a monument to his arrogance. Did he think that made it okay? That a simple, three-word disclaimer could somehow lessen the profound betrayal unfolding in my kitchen? The condescension in his tone, the sheer disrespect, was like throwing gasoline on the fire that was already raging inside me. I stared at him, my vision narrowing to a tunnel. Disbelief was rapidly giving way to a white-hot, blinding rage. A primal fury I hadn't known I was capable of possessing. Before I could stop myself, before reason or consequence could intervene, I lunged. I crossed the space between us in 2 quick strides. My fist, propelled by a lifetime of love and a moment of shattering hate, connected with his jaw. The impact was a solid, sickening thud that reverberated up my arm. A guttural groan escaped his lips, and he staggered back, clutching his face, his smug amusement finally replaced by shock and pain. "Nathan, stop!" Sophia screamed, her voice sharp with panic. But I wasn't listening. I wasn't thinking. The architect was gone. The loving husband was gone. Something older, something more reptilian, was in control now. David tried to steady himself, his hand still pressed against his jaw. "You're crazy, man," he spat, his words slurred. "Just a kiss." I snarled, stepping toward him, backing him into the corner of the kitchen. "In my house? On my birthday? You think I'm going to let you walk out of here after this?" Sophia threw herself between us, her arms outstretched, a fragile, desperate barrier. "Nathan, please, stop. He's hurt." Good, I thought, the word a shard of ice in my mind. He deserved worse. So much worse. David, clearly realizing he was outmatched and that I was far from finished, started edging toward the back door. "I'm not dealing with this," he muttered, his eyes darting around like a cornered rat. "You've got anger issues, man. Get out," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "And don't ever come back." He didn't need to be told twice. He bolted out of the kitchen, nearly tripping over a stool in his haste. I heard the back door slam shut, the sound punctuating his cowardly retreat. And then, silence. The adrenaline began to drain from my body, leaving me shaking, my knuckles raw and screaming. Sophia stood frozen in front of me, her face pale, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The beautiful, happy woman who had made me pancakes that morning was gone, replaced by this stranger, this terrified accomplice. "Nathan," she began, her voice a trembling whisper. "I can explain." "Explain." I barked, my anger reigniting, turning on her now that its primary target was gone. "What, exactly, is there to explain, Sophia? I just walked in on you kissing another man. In our kitchen. On my birthday. Please, illuminate me." She flinched at the venom in my voice, but I didn't care. The foundation of our life had just been revealed to be sand, and I needed to know why. "It wasn't what it looked like," she said weakly, the most pathetic and insulting of all cliches. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Not what it looked like." "Really?" "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were cheating on me with some slick parasite in a suit." "Who is he, Sophia? Your coworker? Your boss?" She hesitated. That tiny, fractional pause was a confession in itself, more damning than any word. "He's my boss," she admitted, her voice barely audible, her gaze dropping to the floor. I stared at her, the weight of her confession sinking in, crushing the air from my lungs. My wife, the woman who had shared my life for 8 years, the woman who had held my hand through every hardship, had been kissing her boss. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just an act, it was a context. The late nights at the office, the urgent weekend calls, the distracted moods I had attributed to work stress. The entire narrative of our recent past was being rewritten in this single, ugly moment. "How long?" I demanded, my voice cold and flat. "What? How long has this been going on, Sophia?" "It's not like that," she said quickly, tears finally streaming down her face. "This was the first time. I swear. It just happened, Nathan. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You expect me to believe that? That this was just some spontaneous combustion of infidelity? That you just accidentally fell into his arms and onto his mouth? She sobbed harder, her hands covering her face. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Her apologies felt hollow, prefabricated. They were the desperate words of someone caught, not the remorseful words of someone who understood the magnitude of their crime. I couldn't even look at her anymore. The woman standing before me was a stranger, an actress who had been playing a part. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. Nathan, wait, she called after me, her voice ragged. But I didn't stop. I grabbed my car keys from the bowl by the front door and stepped outside, slamming the door behind me. The sound was a definitive, punctuating crack. The sound of a structure breaking. My car became a sealed capsule of rage and grief. I drove, not to anywhere, but from the house, from her, from the smoking crater that used to be my life. The streets blurred past, a meaningless smear of suburban normalcy that felt like a personal insult. How could the world look the same when mine had been so completely upended? My hands were shaking, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind was a chaotic storm of images and sounds. The smug look on David's face. It's just a kiss. The terror in Sophia's eyes. Her pathetic, predictable lies. It wasn't what it looked like. Hours ago, I had been the happiest man in the world. I had a life I had designed, a life I loved. It had felt solid, permanent. Now I knew it had been a facade, a beautifully constructed movie set with nothing but rotting timber behind it. How long? The question hammered at me. Was this the first time? Or just the first time I'd been stupid enough to come home early? Every memory of the past few months was now suspect, tainted. Every late night she'd worked, every girl's night out, every distracted smile was now a potential lie. I was sifting through the rubble of my own memories, trying to find a single piece of truth that hadn't been compromised. I eventually pulled into the empty, darkened parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, amplifying the roar of my own thoughts. I rested my forehead against the cool plastic of the steering wheel, my chest heaving with ragged, dry sobs. The reality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sophia had betrayed me. On my birthday. In our home. The one place that was supposed to be our sanctuary, our fortress against the world. She hadn't just let the enemy through the gates, she had invited him into the throne room. I stayed in that parking lot for what felt like an eternity, staring into the void of the asphalt, as the events of the day replayed on a relentless loop. The anger was a bonfire, but beneath it was a deep, arctic current of heartbreak. I couldn't go back to pretending. This wasn't a crack in the foundation that could be patched over with spackle and a fresh coat of paint. This was a catastrophic structural failure. Eventually, a cold resolve began to crystallize out of the emotional chaos. I had to go back. I didn't want to, but I had to. It was my house. I had built that life, and I wasn't going to be driven from it by her and her cheap, cowardly affair. When I pulled back into the driveway, her car was still there. The house was dark, save for a single light on in the living room. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the next round of this confrontation I never asked for. I found her on the couch, curled into a tight ball, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked small and broken, but I felt no pity, only a vast, weary disgust. She looked up as I entered, her face streaked with tears. "Nathan," she said softly, her voice breaking. I ignored her and headed for the stairs. I couldn't be in the same room as her. I needed distance, a wall. "Please," she called after me, her voice desperate. "Just listen to me. I need to explain." I stopped at the base of the stairs, my hand gripping the smooth, cool wood of the newel post. I turned slowly to face her. "Explain," I said, my voice flat and dead. "What, exactly, do you think you can say to fix this, Sophia?" Because I would genuinely love to hear the architectural plan for that particular miracle. She stood up, her movements hesitant, as if approaching a wild animal. "It was a mistake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I swear, Nathan, it didn't mean anything. It just happened." "It just happened," I repeated, my tone glacial. "So what? You accidentally tripped and your lips landed on his? Is that the best blueprint you've got?" She flinched at my sarcasm. "It was one kiss," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've never done anything like this before. I promise." I let out a bitter laugh that was more of a bark. "One kiss. Right. And I'm supposed to just accept that. Erase the image from my mind. Let's just move on, shall we?" "It's the truth," she insisted, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Nathan. I made a terrible, stupid mistake, but I love you. Please don't let this ruin us. Her words were like salt in the wound. Ruin us? Sophia, we are already ruined. You detonated us this afternoon. This is just me surveying the wreckage. I needed to know more. I needed all the ugly details. Who is he? I asked again. David, my boss. The man you've been working late with? Taking calls from on the weekend? That boss. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air forced from my lungs. How long? I demanded, the question returning, more insistent this time. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with panic. Nathan, it's not what you think. How long, Sophia? I snapped, my voice echoing in the silent house. It wasn't an affair, she said quickly, desperately. I swear. This was the first time anything happened. I stared at her, trying to read the lines of her face, trying to find a single shred of truth to cling to. But how could I trust her? Her credibility was a pile of dust at my feet. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less intense. You didn't just betray me. You humiliated me. You brought him into our house. The house I designed, that we built. You desecrated it. She broke down then, a full-body sob that shook her small frame. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I hate myself for what I've done. Please, Nathan, give me a chance to make this right. I shook my head slowly. The weight of it all was crushing me. I don't know if that's possible. Her sobs filled the room as I turned and walked away, heading upstairs to our bedroom. I locked the door behind me and sank onto the edge of the bed. My head was pounding. I looked around the room, at the framed photos on the dresser, us on our wedding day, us on vacation in Italy, us laughing at some long-forgotten joke. Each photo was a lie, a monument to a past that may never have been real. I grabbed my phone and texted Marcus. Asterisk, can we meet? I need to talk. Asterisk. His reply was immediate. Asterisk, of course. Where? Asterisk. I gave him the address of the Oak Barrel. Before I left, I pulled a small suitcase from the top of the closet and threw in some clothes. A toothbrush, a change of shirt, a book. The bare essentials for a man in exile. As I carried the bag down the stairs, Sophia was standing at the bottom, her face a mask of heartbreak and desperation. Where are you going? She asked, her voice a raw whisper. I need space, I said simply. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away. Nathan, please don't do this, she begged. This isn't me doing anything, I replied, my voice firm and cold. This is you, Sophia. You did this. You drew the blueprint for this ruin. I walked out the door without looking back. The Oak Barrel was a cocoon of dark wood and low light, smelling of old leather and spilled whiskey. It was a place for secrets and sorrows. Marcus was already there, sitting in our usual booth in the back, 2 beers sweating on the table between them. He looked up as I approached, concern etched into the lines around his eyes. You okay, man? He asked, though the answer was written all over my face. I slid into the seat opposite him, the worn leather groaning in protest. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the tremor in my fingers. No, I said bluntly. Not even close. What happened? He asked, leaning forward, his voice low. I took a long pull from the beer, the cold liquid doing nothing to quench the fire in my gut. And then I told him. Everything. The forgotten wallet. The black car. The laughter. The kiss. David's arrogant dismissal. The punch. Sophia's pathetic, tearful denials. The words tumbled out of me, a torrent of pain and rage I could no longer contain. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking and my voice was raw. Marcus just sat there, listening, his expression growing darker with every detail. When I was done, he let out a long, low whistle. Damn, Nate, he said, shaking his head. I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice hollow. Do I confront her again? Do I try to fix this? Is it even fixable? Or do I just walk away and demolish the whole thing? He took a slow sip of his beer, thinking. Look, he said finally. This is your call. No one else's. If you think there's something left to salvage, if you think you can ever look at her the same way again, that's one path. But if that trust is gone, man, a marriage without trust is just an empty building. It might look good from the outside, but it's got no foundation. It's a teardown. Trust star. The word hung in the air between us. How could I ever trust her again? Every word she said would be suspect. Every late night at work, every text message, every private smile would be a potential lie. He was right. The foundation was gone. We talked for hours. Marcus didn't offer easy answers or cheap platitudes. He just listened, a solid, unwavering presence in the storm of my life. He let me be angry. He let me be heartbroken. By the time I left the bar, it was nearly midnight, and I was no closer to a solution, but I felt less alone. I couldn't go home. So I checked into a small, anonymous hotel off the highway. The room was sterile and quiet, the silence amplifying my loneliness. I lay on the stiff, unfamiliar bed, staring at the textured ceiling, my mind a relentless movie projector. Our first date, a clumsy, nervous affair at a campus coffee shop. The day I proposed, on a rainy afternoon in Central Park, the ring box feeling impossibly heavy in my pocket. The way she used to look at me, with an adoration that made me feel like I could build empires. When had that changed? And why hadn't I seen it? Was I so absorbed in my own blueprints, my own designs, that I had failed to notice the corrosion eating away at the core of our own structure? The next morning, I woke up feeling heavy, hungover from emotion. I checked my phone. A string of missed calls and texts from Sophia. Sophia, Nathan, please come home. Asterisk. Sophia, I need to talk to you. I can fix this. Asterisk. Sophia, I'm so sorry. I love you. Asterisk. I deleted them all without responding. Her words were meaningless now. They were just desperate attempts to patch a hole in a sinking ship. Later that day, an idea took root in my mind. An ugly, necessary thought. I needed to know the truth. The whole truth. Not her version of it. I called Gloria, our housekeeper. She was a kind, discreet woman in her 60s who had been with us for years. She was a part of the house, a quiet observer of our lives. If anyone knew what had been going on behind my back, it was her. Gloria, it's Nathan, I said when she answered. Mr. Nathan, she said, her voice full of surprise. Is everything okay? Mrs. Hale seemed so upset yesterday. I hesitated. I hated dragging her into this. Not really, Gloria. Listen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, sir, she said, her tone growing cautious. The man who was here yesterday. Her boss, David. Have you seen him at the house before? When I wasn't home. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head, the conflict between loyalty to Sophia and a sense of what was right. Sir, I don't want to get involved. Gloria, please, I said, my voice cracking, the desperation leaking through. I need to know. She sighed, a heavy, weary sound. I've seen his car here a couple of times. Yes, she admitted, her voice low. They always said they were working on a big project. But it didn't seem right. The way they laughed. The way she closed the study door. Her words landed like a series of body blows. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a pattern. A history. A long, calculated deception. Thank you, Gloria, I said, my voice tight. That's all I needed to know. I hung up the phone and sat in the sterile silence of the hotel room. The last remnants of my doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. She had been lying to me for months. The anger I'd felt before returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't a wild, chaotic fire. It was a controlled burn. It was focused. And it was directed not just at her, but at him. And at myself. For being so blind. For trusting so completely. For designing a life on a faulty foundation. I called Marcus again. She's been lying for months, I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of rage. Sounds like it, he said quietly. So, what are you going to do, Nate? I don't know, I admitted. But I can't just let this slide. I can't let them get away with this. Whatever you decide, he said, his voice firm, make sure it's for you. Don't let them take any more from you than they already have. Don't let them turn you into someone you're not. His words stuck with me. But it was too late. I was already becoming someone else. Someone colder. Someone more calculating. Someone who understood that sometimes, before you can rebuild, you have to demolish everything in sight. The decision to investigate was not born of suspicion, but of necessity. Sophia's version of the truth was a flimsy, self-serving structure, and I needed to know the real blueprint of her betrayal. The anger that burned in my chest was no longer a wild inferno. It was a focused, high-intensity flame, the kind used for demolition. I started with the mundane, the digital breadcrumbs of a modern life. The shared online account for our phone bills. I didn't need a password. I had set it up years ago. As I logged in, a wave of nausea washed over me. This felt like a violation, a trespass into a private space. But then I remembered the image of her and David in my kitchen, and the guilt evaporated. She had forfeited her right to privacy the moment she brought him into our home. I combed through the call logs, my eyes scanning the rows of numbers and dates. A pattern emerged quickly. Dozens of calls to and from a single number I didn't recognize. David's number. They were frequent, often late at night, especially during the weeks I was out of town on business trips. There were long calls on weekends when she had told me she was out with friends. Each call log was another lie, another crack in the facade. But call logs weren't enough. I needed more. Hard evidence. That's when I thought of Ethan. Ethan Hayes and I had been in the same architecture program in college. He was brilliant, but he lacked the patience for the slow, meticulous work of design. He was drawn to the puzzles, the deconstruction of problems. He'd left architecture behind and found his calling as a private investigator, specializing in high-stakes corporate and marital disputes. We hadn't stayed in close touch, but there was a bond there, a shared history. I found his number and called him. Ethan, it's Nathan Scott. Nate? Man, it's been a while, he said, his voice the same calm, analytical tone I remembered. What's up? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him everything. The birthday, the kiss, the lies, the phone calls. I laid out the wreckage of my marriage for his clinical inspection. He listened without interrupting, without a single word of judgment or sympathy. When I was finished, he finally spoke. All right, he said, his voice all business. I'll look into it. Give me his name, workplace, phone number, anything you've got. I'll start digging. While Ethan began his work, I found myself drawn back to the house. I told Sophia I needed to pick up some more things. I found her laptop sitting on her desk in the study, unlocked. The temptation was too great to resist. I sat down, my stomach twisting, and opened her email. I scrolled through the inbox, my heart pounding. Most of it was work-related, junk mail, messages from her mother. But the emails from David stood out. The tone was too familiar, too friendly. And then I found it. An email with the subject line, last night. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. The words on the screen confirmed my worst fears. Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible. You're intoxicating. Can't wait to see you again. The email was dated 2 weeks ago, during the time I was in Chicago for the convention. They had been together. In our house? In a hotel? The ambiguity was its own kind of torture. I felt a surge of rage so intense it made my vision blur. I slammed the laptop shut. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a mistake. This was a full-blown affair, built on a mountain of lies. The next morning, Ethan called. His findings were swift and brutal. I've been following David for a few days, he said, his voice flat. He's not exactly discreet. I've got pictures of him and Sophia meeting for lunch at a cozy little cafe near her office. Looks pretty intimate. He paused. And I've spoken to a couple of his former colleagues. Apparently, your wife isn't his first subordinate. He's got a history. He's a predator who uses his position of power. His marriage is also on the rocks. His wife, Laura, apparently has no idea about any of this. Send me everything, I said, my voice cold. By the end of the day, I had a digital folder filled with the architecture of their deceit. Photos. Emails. Witness statements. It was more than enough to confront Sophia, to expose David. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was the one holding all the blueprints. I had the power to demolish their carefully constructed worlds, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The calm that settled over me was terrifying. The wild, chaotic grief had been burned away, leaving behind the cold, clear logic of a demolition expert. I had the plans. I had the dynamite. The only question left was where to place the charges. I decided to start with Sophia. She was the primary structure, the one whose collapse would be the most personal. I called her and told her to meet me at the house. My voice was clipped, devoid of emotion. It left no room for negotiation. When I arrived, she was sitting on the couch, wringing her hands. The house, our house, felt like a neutral territory now, a courtroom. Nathan, she began, standing up as I entered. Sit down, I said, my tone sharp. She flinched, but obeyed. I sat in the armchair across from her and placed the thick manila folder on the coffee table between us. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. While you've been leaving me tearful voicemails, I began, my voice steady. I've been busy uncovering the truth. Her eyes darted to the folder. What truth? She asked, her voice a reedy whisper. Don't play dumb, Sophia. I opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was one of Ethan's shots, her and David at the cafe, their heads close together, her hand on his arm. A picture of casual intimacy. Her face went white. Nathan, it's not what it looks like. Really? I cut her off. Because it looks exactly like what I walked in on in our kitchen. I pulled out the printed copy of the email. And I don't think this is what it looks like either, is it? I read his words aloud, each one a hammer blow in the quiet room. Asterisk, last night was incredible. You're intoxicating. Asterisk. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, let me explain, she pleaded. Oh, I'd love to hear your explanation, I said, leaning back. Tell me how you weren't lying to me for months while you were sleeping with your boss. The words tumbled out of her in a frantic, desperate rush. She was flattered by his attention. She felt insecure in her career compared to mine. She never meant for it to go so far. She loved me, only me. It was a textbook confession, full of self-pity and devoid of real accountability. You were flattered? I repeated, my voice dripping with scorn. So you threw away 8 years of marriage? For a predator who gets off on seducing his employees. She buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said firmly. You didn't just betray me, you disrespected our entire life together. I stood up. You need to pack your things. You're leaving. She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? This marriage is over, I said, the words feeling like a final, necessary amputation. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from her soon. Nathan, please, she begged, sliding off the couch onto her knees in front of me, grabbing at my hands. Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything. I looked down at the woman I had once loved more than life itself, and I felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. You gave up on us the moment you chose him, I said, pulling my hands away. I walked out of the house, leaving her sobbing on the floor amidst the wreckage. A strange sense of relief washed over me. The first demolition was complete. Now, it was David's turn. David's demolition required a more strategic approach. He had treated my life as his personal playground, and I was going to burn it to the ground. Ethan's folder was my ammunition. I started with his professional life. I drafted an anonymous, carefully worded email to the senior HR director at his company. I attached the statements from his former employees, the photographic evidence of his meetings with Sophia, and a few of the more damning, non-work-related emails between them. I painted a picture of a serial predator who was a massive liability to the company. Within a week, Ethan confirmed the news. He's been suspended, pending an investigation, he told me over the phone. The board is taking it very seriously. Step 1 was complete. Next, his marriage. This was the most morally complex part of the plan. Laura, his wife, was an innocent. But she was living a lie, and she deserved to know the truth about the man she was married to. I mailed her a package, another anonymous delivery. It contained the photos of David with Sophia, and a brief, typed note suggesting she look into her husband's activities more closely. A few days later, Ethan called again. She threw him out. Found a whole second life on his phone. She's filing for divorce and going after everything. I didn't feel joy, but I felt a grim sense of justice. His facade was crumbling. The final blow was public. Using a throwaway social media account, I released a sanitized version of the story, focusing on David's pattern of predatory behavior in the workplace. I didn't use his full name, but the details were specific enough that anyone in their industry would know exactly who it was about. The post went viral in our local business community. His reputation was irrevocably tarnished. A few weeks later, I saw him. He was sitting alone on a park bench, looking like a ghost. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face was gaunt, and he looked 10 years older. He was a ruined man. I walked past without a word. He didn't deserve my attention. The revenge was complete. But as I sat with Marcus at the oak barrel that night, a new, unsettling feeling began to creep in. So, it's done, Marcus said, raising his glass. To justice. To justice, I echoed, but the word felt hollow. Was it worth it? He asked. I thought about it. I had one. I had demolished them both. Yes, I said finally. It was worth it. But was it? The anger was gone, but so was everything else. I was left standing alone in the rubble of my own life, holding a victory that felt suspiciously like defeat. In the quiet aftermath of the demolition, a new, unwelcome reality set in. The anger that had fueled me for weeks was gone, and its absence left a void. I had successfully raised the lives of those who wronged me, but I was still the one living in the fallout zone. Sophia, true to her word, had moved out. She left messages, not begging for me back, but updating me on her life. She'd resigned from her job. She was in therapy. She was trying to understand the why of her actions. I know I can't undo what I've done, * one email read. But I'm trying to rebuild myself from the foundation up. Not for you, but for me. I owed myself that much. I owed you that much. Her words were a strange comfort. They didn't excuse her actions, but they showed a flicker of the woman I once knew, the one who was strong, who took responsibility. I began my own reconstruction. I sold the house, unable to live with its ghosts. I moved into a stark, modern apartment downtown, a place with no memories. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the clean lines and logical progressions of architecture. I started running, pushing my body to its limits, trying to outrun the thoughts in my head. Months passed. The sharp edges of the pain began to dull. One day, I agreed to meet Sophia for coffee. It was the first time I'd seen her since I'd told her to leave. She looked different, calmer. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet, somber strength. We didn't talk about forgiveness or the future. We talked about her therapy, about my work. It was hesitant, awkward, but it was honest. I know I broke your trust, she said, her voice steady. And maybe it can never be rebuilt. I understand that. I just want you to know that I'm sorry for the man I hurt, and I'm working every day to make sure I never become that person again. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. As I walked away from the cafe, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. Holding on to the anger and the pain was like keeping the wreckage of the old building on my new construction site. It was preventing me from building anything new. I wasn't ready to forgive her completely. I didn't know if our marriage could ever be rebuilt, but I was ready to let go of the hate. That night, for the first time in a long time, I sat down at my drafting table, not to design a building for a client, but to sketch out a new blueprint for myself. It was a simple design, with clean lines, a solid foundation, and plenty of room for light. The future was uncertain, a blank page. But for the first time since my 35th birthday, it didn't feel terrifying. It felt like an opportunity. The reconstruction had begun,